Hey, so hello class and welcome. So to kick off our class and term about innovation and our future upcoming web quest, we're going to talk a little bit about dieselization of the railroads during the Great Depression. This is going to serve as like our case study to get us into the idea of innovation because it's a term that gets thrown around a lot now, and most people tend to think of like things like Uber or Lyft or Amazon as the pinnacle of innovation. But there's other forms of innovation, and the forms of innovation we're talking about today are going to be more applicable to what you would face as a business owner, and we're going to be getting into that. So the goals of this class are understanding how technological progress during the Great Depression affected the passenger services railroads offered, which is linked to the CTE standards. Understand that not all decisions are clear-cut, which is standard 5.2, and we're going to introduce the web quest potentially at the end, which will loosely align with 11th grade US history standards. So there's generally two types of innovation that we'll mostly be talking about. Now there's other ways of thinking about this, but these are the two main types and the two main vocabulary words that we're going to be working with. So there's the leap of technology, which is a new technology is displacing an old one, or a existing technology fundamentally changes, which is opposed to more general innovation, which is making changes to something that is established by introducing new methods, ideas, or products. So we're going to be getting into like how railroads generally prior to the 1930s operated, which as you can see on screen is steam engines and the coach behind it, which is a heavyweight coach, which has a cement floor and is made out of riveted steel, which is very heavy and very inefficient. And this entire process is very inefficient as far as like railroading today goes, or what would come after, because these are very labor intensive to run, very labor intensive to fix, and just very labor intensive just in general as a technology. Its saving grace was that it was also a leap of technology over horses, which is a thing that people don't really realize, that even though this is a very incredibly inefficient technology, it is still very much more efficient than hauling thing on horseback. So in 1934, the Pioneer Zephyr, which is this very shiny piece of technology on the screen, was launched. It is the first, from what I can tell, first mainline example of diesel operations in trains, or at least passenger trains, as well as this is also a double-barreled innovation. The way it was built was actually used arc welding to weld stainless steel together, which made the trains overall lighter, and the diesel components made everything just cheaper to run and more efficient. And we're going to talk about what the key advancements were. And this is one of the first uses of diesel locomotives in mainline service, which basically means more than just switching engines and cars around a yard. This is actually used like on the main line. As pointed out on the last slide, this train ran regularly from Chicago to Lincoln, Nebraska. These are far more efficient to maintain and operate compared to steam engines. Today, diesel engines and diesel trains use two-person crews, whereas trains back then, not including passenger crews, would usually be 7 people. So significant savings in labor. Also, diesel engines could go about 1,000,000 miles without needing any major maintenance, whereas steam locomotives only went about 100,000, so much longer and more usable lifespan. And the coach part of the last picture was just a lot cheaper and a lot easier to manufacture and a lot lighter. And also, although this is kind of not really mentioned and not really applicable to the lesson and what we're going to be talking about, it was the first utilization of head-end power, which was they had a secondary generator generating electricity for the train, which was an uncommon technology until Amtrak started renovating its cars in the late 70s when they started taking over, when they did take over passenger service in this country. And why did these matter? It made trains cheaper to operate, which again, big money-saving things tend to go over really well if you're a business, which is a thing to keep in mind. And it made them more visually attractive. Again, this is an Amtrak train that was built in the 70s. And they also started experimenting with modernizing sleeping accommodations, which is where product development comes in. So this is going to be in the context of you handling innovation and changing tastes, not you driving them, which is what we're getting at here. Most business owners are not going to be the ones that are going to be fundamentally changing the world, but people who are going to have to live in the wake of all of that. And this web quest that we're going to be going into is going to be your introduction to how do you handle that? How do you handle the world changing, and what are you going to do about it? So, while we get into the product design, this is generally what a coach and, well, the left and the center is what a sleeping car looked like prior to the Streamline era, the era that came after the 1930s, and then the one all the way on the right is a coach seat. And eventually they ended up going to fully enclosed rooms, which is the most common type. They had bedrooms for 2 people, bedrooms for 1 person, and the coaches themselves looked more like airliners do today. So this is also another thing you have to keep in mind, is that changing tastes also could come along with changing technology. And as a business owner, you need to be aware of that, because one of the main things that also helped kill the railroads off as a form of transportation is that they didn't entirely go fully into the deep end on embracing this technology. They only kind of sort of did it, and then only sort of did it after World War II a little bit. But anyways, what were the impacts of all of this technological change? Is that trains started looking like what we think of as trains today, and both inside and outside. And this was somewhat successful in bringing people back to the railroads before the rise of jets in the late 50s. And there's a supplemental video here on the end about how the current COVID situation and the Great Depression, what we're going to be talking about today, kind of have similar parallels. So you can kind of see a historical and a contemporary example kind of mashing together. And this is the hyperlink or the hyperdoc at the end of it. And this right here is the web quest where we are going to analyze what you guys would do in the middle of the Great Depression if you were someone leading a passenger railroad. And we're going to go into this in class on whichever day we're seeing you after this, probably going to be Monday or Tuesday. So I hope you did enjoy, and I will see you in class.